Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dan Sidambaram. We have a good session today. Today I have Mohammed Basha, Rajesh, and Bala Nair. And myself, Dan Sidambaram. I'm a director at Citrus Consulting Services, who are based here in Dubai. We operate across Middle East and Africa. We're a consulting and services company. Basha and Rajesh, my colleague, they will help me throughout the presentation for the webinar today. And Bala is from VMware, is kind enough to join us today in the panel for the Q&A towards the tail end of the webinar. So the idea is today, I know I'm just going a slide back to the main screen. The whole idea for the webinar today is to show you how complex it is to run an IT infrastructure this day and age. There are a lot of moving parts. The technology is complicated. Businesses are becoming more and more demanding. Users are becoming more and more sort of tech savvy. Managing the IT has become quite complex. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be complex. We made a bold statement, and it's based on a fact. It is as simple as setting up your data. It's quite easy to set up your entire data center in a matter of 4 hours, and we'll walk you through how it is feasible. This is the agenda. We'll go over an overview in terms of the challenges that IT is facing today, in terms of running the data center, managing the data center, both on-premise as well as on the cloud. We'll take one use case, how a hypothetical use case, how a hypothetical customer, assuming this is you, as an end customer managing your data center, running your data center, supporting the businesses, assume it's you, how you could actually make cost savings, but at the same time, manage and run your data center quite easy and comfortably. Yeah, and then we'll go over the nitty-gritties of VMware, VMware Cloud on AWS, and some of the promotions that we're currently running, and then we'll go into the Q&A section. Now, if you look at today, you go to any large enterprises, mid to large enterprises, almost all of them are running some form of workloads on the public cloud infrastructure, and they all have, in a way, all the CTOs and CIOs in these enterprises have a cloud strategy, right? And many of them even have a cloud first policy as part of their the IT governance structure. And they're running, public cloud, running their workloads on private cloud. And many of these leaders, if you ask them, taking the stats from one of the research agencies, they ran the survey, and the response was quite quite surprising. When you think this day and age, everybody's talking about moving to cloud is as easy as swiping your credit card and starting the cloud journey, right? Maybe it is for a greenfield workloads, but then when you talk about data center migration, when you talk about applications that are already running, migrating them over to a cloud infrastructure, apparently it's not easy. There is quite a number of difficulties that they go through. And as per the survey, almost 73% of them, they say that it takes more than a year to complete the entire end-to-end migration, right, from the assessment to doing economic benefit analysis to pilot migration, an actual critical workload migration. By the time they complete this, what we call a day 0 or a day 1 operations, and then go into day 2 operations, it takes anywhere between a year or more. Yeah, and a lot of companies have complained saying that the migration project has it's complex and exceeded the budget what we had earmarked. Yeah. The reason, because, and if you ask me, the reason why it is complex, why it's not as easy as it is being promoted or as it looks, simply because on the data center you're running your workloads on a completely different platform. The underlying infrastructure is entirely different, and you look at it, almost 96% of the customers are running their workloads in some form of virtualized environment, right? And majority of them are running on VMware. If you were to migrate that, there are migration tools that are available. If you were to use those migration tools and convert it over to the target platform, the conversion takes time, the data transfer takes time. It's a bit complicated, is because now you're stuck, right? You're running certain workloads on one public cloud and another workload on another public cloud. Suddenly you wanted to move them from one to another. The underlying platform is different, the technology is different, the conversion becomes an uphill task. Now that's where we're introducing VMware Cloud on AWS, especially if you're a customer running your workloads on VMware on-premise in the data center. It is quite simple and easy to migrate it over to VMC on AWS, where you get the complete SDDC stack set up on the cloud. And this is where I'm going back to the statement of this webinar, where you can set up the entire SDDC stack in less than 4 hours, right? So that means the complete infrastructure is ready, from a compute, from a network, storage, and you're ready to start migrating your first workload, within the first day of your launch, of this project. And this is something that is quite flexible in the sense that there is no conversion. Whatever you're running it on-premise, the underlying platform remains the same. And when you go to one cloud, it stays in the same format. Tomorrow you need to move from one cloud to another cloud, or back to on-premise. The underlying platform still remains the same. The format still remains the same. So it allows you to implement a true multi-cloud strategy within your organization, but at the same time, it puts you in the driver's seat, where you control the cost, where you control the technology platform that you choose to run your workloads. Now, like I said, a lot of customers are looking for an integrated and a hybrid approach, because they still have certain workloads that are still running on-premise for several reasons. Data sovereignty, or they already have invested in a data center. The return of investment is still yet to be realized on those investments, or as a mission critical application needs to be closer to the users from terms of latency. So you still decide to keep some portion of your workloads on-premise, and then the rest of the workloads onto the cloud, leverage the flexibility, scalability, and agility of the public cloud infrastructure. So you get the best of both worlds. And the beauty with VMC on AWS is that it not only gives you a complete SDDC stack, but also allows you to leverage the true innovation which the hyperscalers bring to you. For example, in this case, let's say AWS. The hyperscalers still add value, still brings difference to your IT operations. The real difference is the services, the new innovative services that they offer. So you run your workloads on an SDDC stack on the VMC on AWS, and that allows and that connects to the native services on AWS. It could be an S3, it could be you want to do an AI ML workload such as your forecast or comprehend on AWS. You can leverage them by keeping your workloads on AWS, VMC on AWS through your VPC pairing. Now let's go through the hypothetical use case that I was talking about. The reason why we started with this is to give you an idea in terms of the cost savings, right? And how much money you could save, especially if you're considering, moving to cloud. We talked about the flexibility in terms of the platform migration, but I want to spend some time on the cost element. So if you look at the cost, so we took one hypothetical customer. Yeah, the customer say has operations across the globe, and they have workloads running on multiple cloud providers. These are hyperscalers, and they also have some workloads running on premise, right? So a good mix of 50% on premise and close to 50% on premise, and the rest is split between these two cloud providers. And we will go through this assessment approach where you start with the planning, as in what is the overall strategy, the IT strategy for this particular customer over 3 years, 5 years. What is it they wanted to achieve? And we do the assets. We did the assets analysis, meaning how much are they spending on all of these three hosting locations, 2 public cloud providers and 1 on-premise hosting. Look at the application profile, look at the user profile, look at the cost, CapEx as well as the OpEx. Identify the bottlenecks, identify the challenges by doing the gap analysis, and we identify the opportunity areas. So, so what we have been able to find out, or we've been able to, come out with, is the customer is approximately spending about say $300,000 on a cloud infrastructure A, and spending about say $100,000 on hyperscaler B, and spending about say $400,000 on premise, roughly about, give or take, say $800,000 or $700,000, right? Scenario 1: if you were to migrate the entire workload from all of these 3 locations to consolidate into one, say, a cloud provider, it would cost them close to, say, $800,000, right? As opposed to the earlier 700. If we were to consolidate everything and keep it under one cloud provider, what we've found out is that the cost actually escalates. It goes up, right? Scenario 2, where you bring in VMC on AWS, in this case. Now what happens is the same workload, if you were to run it on a VMC on AWS, what happens is the cost comes down quite drastically. We're talking about close to 40-45% of savings. So this means instead of moving your entire workload to one hyperscaler, if we were to move to a VMC or VMware on AWS Cloud, essentially you can bring down your cost by 50%, right? So we've tried different scenarios, and we've given you the ones which made a lot of sense. So the cheapest you could do on a hyperscaler is about 800,000, and then you go to VMware Cloud. It comes down to so 370 or $400,000. So net, in summary, what we have been able to find is that assume your total infrastructure cost is about say 700K today. Option one, if you keep everything on premise, because of the growth and the change in prices, keeping everything on premise will escalate to $1 million. Option two, keeping everything on pure hyperscaler, the price goes up to 800,000, still close to $1 million. However, if you were to migrate your data center and the other workloads that are running on other public cloud infrastructure, consolidate them under VMware Cloud on AWS, where you get the complete SDDC stack over 10 hosts, we're talking about less than $400,000 of annual cost. So this is an actual 47% reduction in terms of your IT budget. So this day and age, where people are kind of holding back a lot of investments into CapEx or CapEx budgets, this 47% can be put on to initiatives or projects that are essential, but not being able to find budget to to kick off these projects. So it gives you a lot of benefits, and I've not even touched on the technical aspects, and probably towards the subsequent slides, Basha and Rajesh will talk about the technical benefits and how it gives you the ability to, like I said, it puts you in the driver's seat, where you control, where you want to keep your workloads and how much you want to pay, and how you want to run it. It's as simple as, for example, today, if you want what we call T-shirt size, you want a machine with 2 vCPU, 7.5 gig of RAM. Today, if you look at it, I can only think of one cloud provider who offers that kind of flexibility. But the other ones, you're forced to pick the standard size, what we call the T-shirt size for the virtual machines, what they offer. Whereas in this case, you have the complete SDDC stack. You decide what size VM that you need to carve out, just as how you would normally do it in a data center. You decide how big of a virtual machine that you need to carve out based on the application's actual needs, not something that you would have needed 3 years down the line or 5 years down the line. Yeah. So net in summary, what we're able to find from the study is that in terms of deployment maintenance, running it on premise, of course, it has a lot of challenges in terms of complexity and the time it takes to acquire a hardware, provision it, maintain it. VMC and public cloud infrastructure, of course, gives you that flexibility. You can go start anytime. Even with VMC on AWS, you get a managed hardware, a hardware which is managed and maintained by VMware and AWS. And in this case, the support is provided by VMware themselves. So you don't have to worry about the underlying hardware. It's taken care of. So that headache is off your shoulders. Yeah. In terms of upgrades, maintenance and upgrades, VMware take care of it. Ability to do optimization, right? Prioritizing, resources for workloads that are essential, business critical. VMC, of course, gives you that ability to, pick and choose, the spec size, the fault tolerance, redundancy and fault tolerance. Like I said, it's a managed hardware. VMware will take care of it. You can, for example, you want to, like I said, you wanted to take or leverage one of the AWS native services, things like, say, you want to do video transcoding, right? So AWS has a lot of services around that, or you want a long-term, backup and archival. You have some strategic reasons you wanted to store data for 7 years, 10 years, 16 years. Imagine if you were to keep them on premise, it's going to cost a lot of money. Even if it go to the cheapest of the cheapest solution and tape libraries and LTO tapes, it's still going to cost you a lot of money. Whereas AWS has a lot of cheaper options and reliable options where you can store your data long-term into Glacier, where your data is archived for however long you want to keep it, and you can retrieve it whenever you want it. In terms of migrations, it's a native, like I said, it's a native migration. There is no conversion of your platform. Your underlying VMDK still remains as a VMDK. So you have full control of where you want to keep it. And like I said, you don't want to keep them on the cloud. You want to move them back. You have the flexibility. Yeah. In terms of skill sets, it's a very important aspect. Today, if you're a VMware house, there is no sort of, unlearning and relearning. It's a sort of an incremental learning. Your vCenter remains the same. Whatever vCenter you use today, you use the same to manage the cloud infrastructure, the VMware Cloud infrastructure. So there is no sort of, additional and new learning that you would have to, go through, especially the unlearning part. Yeah. DR and replications, there are native capabilities, and you can also bring in third-party things like, Veeam or other SRM type, software. Tenancy. This is, like I said, you get your own dedicated physical hardware, right? So there's no the question of noisy neighbor. It's your own hardware being provisioned and managed by VMware. So you have that physical hardware isolation. If you have certain compliance requirements where data need to be kept in an isolated hardware, this still gives you the ability. And scalability is one of the interesting factors. Today, if you on-premise, if you need to add a new hardware, add more capacity, it's going to take a couple of months, Whereas when it comes to the VMware Cloud, it's a matter of adding a new, I'm talking about physical server, adding a new server is as quick as 10 minutes, right? So the initial first cluster, when you set up the management cluster, it will take about 2 hours, but then to add more additional hosts as in physical servers, it will take literally 10 minutes. And this is how we were able to prove that we can launch a complete data center. Someone, like this particular hypothetical customer, who's got hundreds of applications, thousands of users, 3 different locations, hosting locations. We can launch the entire data center to, host all of these in a matter of less than 4 hours. Yeah. So with that, I will conclude my part of the, the story. To take it further into the different various use cases where this VMware Cloud on AWS is applicable, makes more sense. Let me invite Mohammed Basha to take it forward from here. Basha.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. For the introduction and the use case for the cost saving and That's true. You should be looking for the true hybrid cloud actually, and that's gonna bring a lot of cost savings as you have demonstrated in the previous slides. And in addition to the cost savings, actually, you should make sure that you're not gonna spend whatever you saved on migrating your workloads, but as you explained, and as I'm going to take you through how the migration can be done, it's natively done using the HCX platform by VMware. You can do as simple as a vMotion migration without downtimes in specific conditions actually. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that you're wondering now what type of use cases or what type of scenarios that can instigate me or can make me think to move to VMC on AWS. And I would say anything that you are thinking to do it on premises, you can definitely do it on VMC on AWS. I'm just mentioning here a couple of scenarios or a couple of use cases that if you are one of them, you can definitely think about VMC on AWS to move on as one of the options actually, to provide the cost saving and to provide the cloud flexibility and scalability and agility as Dan was mentioning. So if you are a customer that intending to extend the data center, and especially nowadays bringing in new hardware, that might take a lot of time, because as far as I know, most of the stocks are empty now, and it would take a lot of time to bring new hardware. So if you're thinking of that, definitely VMC on AWS would be one of your options, especially if you are a vSphere customer and you have vSphere environment on premises, so you can gain the capabilities of integrating your on-premises infrastructure with the VMC on AWS. If you are a customer that has some compliance and have some regulatories that force you to keep the production data on premises without leaving to the cloud, again, if you have a big environment for test and dev, definitely VMC on AWS would be a good option for you. You can move all of this environment there, and you can remove the headache of maintaining the infrastructure for test and dev and give it to VMware to take care of it. Again, if you are a vSphere customer, that would be the best option for you, because you can have full integration between VMC and AWS and your vCenter on premises, so that you can have a single pane of glass management. If you are a customer that are planning to go for VDI because of the current situation, so definitely VMC on AWS would be a good option for you. Or even if you are a Horizon customer, are you thinking to extend to add more VDI machines for your employees, so you can extend and you can integrate with VMC on AWS. So that's one scenario of data center extension. I would highly urge you to go to check the option of VMC on AWS as a data center extension of yours. But if you are planning to do disaster recovery, or if you're considering to replace your current disaster recovery location, because it could be costly for you, so with the SRM tool, as Dan was speaking about it, or with any other replication tool that works with vSphere, you can definitely consider this, and you can put your disaster recovery site on VMC on AWS. One more thing is the cloud migration. So if you are, if you have the end of your contract, like our scenario, the scenario that Dan was speaking about, so the customer is coming end of life of his on-premises hardware, and he's doing a hardware refresh, and it will cost them a fortune actually to bring everything on premises for that. So in that case, VMC on AWS can give you the cost benefits in addition to full-fledged hardware packed up with vSphere environment. So you can do the migration seamlessly from your on-premises, especially if you are a vSphere customer. You can do a migration seamlessly and as simple as a vMotion migration to VMC on AWS, and that would definitely bring the total cost for you down, and even the migration, which is one of the major challenges for anybody who's thinking to move to the cloud. It will bring the cost for the migration to the minimum for you. If you're thinking of doing a next generation apps and modernizing your applications and using Kubernetes and containers and all these kind of new applications, so again, VMC on AWS is that, with announcement of vSphere 7 and the Tanzu platform. So now you can build up all your modern applications on the vSphere environment, and because you're setting because the hardware is setting actually and is hosted on AWS data center, so you'll have direct connection to all AWS native services to be able to access them. So let me take you with the scenario for the data center extension, which you will definitely start. That's the typical scenario, and I want to take you through that, like how simple to do this extension and how fast you can do the extension for your data center. So let me take you through this scenario. So the typical customer would start from the on-premises environment with a vCenter server to manage the hardware and to manage all the virtual machines and the networking and everything. So if you are a customer like that and you decided to go for VMC on AWS, you can spin up your first cluster, as Dan was mentioning. You can spin it up in 2 hours as a first cluster. First cluster can start with minimum 3 nodes. And then you will have your full VCF, VMware Cloud Foundation, and full SDDC spinned up for you in only 2 hours on VMC on AWS. So you have your vSphere environment, the vSAN and NSX, all of them on VMC on AWS. And speaking of the management, so because you have vCenter up on the cloud and vCenter on premises, so you can integrate them with hyperlinked mode, and you'll have unified management for all your infrastructure, either sitting on AWS or sitting on premises. Even the content libraries, if you have your ISOs, your templates, and it's already built, you're taking care of it on your premises, so you can share it with your vCenter on VMC on AWS, and then you can get the unified management and still utilizing all your templates and your ISOs that you have built on premises. If you're using any type of operations tools like the vRealize suite provided by VMware, you can still keep using that by just deploying a connector, for example, to your new infrastructure on the VMC on AWS, or even you can go for the subscription model provided newly by VMware, like to manage all your infrastructure, either sitting on premises or on AWS. In terms of the connection, definitely you will be thinking like to have a connection between AWS and on premises. So in terms of the connection, you can use either a VPN, a site-to-site VPN, or you can do a direct connect to have a faster connection and more robust connection between both clusters. But if you are an NSX customer, so definitely you can have a unified network infrastructure and security rules that span across both on-premises and the AWS clusters for you. So you can even extend your layer 2 network between both of them, so you can move your virtual machines back and forth without even need to change the IP address of those virtual machines. And you can plan your disaster recovery scenarios without changing the IP addresses for them. So it's the same tools. What I'm trying to highlight here is the same tools that whatever tools you were using on premises, you'll keep using actually on VMC on AWS. The same set of experience, the same skill set that you have already in your environment, you can still using that on VMC and on AWS. But furthermore, because the cluster is deployed on AWS infrastructure, so you can have a direct connection to all AWS native services like S3, for example, to put your backup on, any type of services that is provided by AWS, you can get a direct connection to it, and you won't have to pay the cost of the ingress and egress traffic between both clusters, because actually you're not going to the internet, you're sitting inside AWS data center and you're communicating directly to all these services. So that's a nice feature. As Dan was highlighting, you're getting both the good of both worlds actually. So you're getting the benefits of all cloud services, the agile cloud services on AWS, plus having your infrastructure and your virtual machine settings on vSphere environment on VMC on AWS. Moreover, the cloud agility, so these are the features that you're looking for when you move to the cloud. So the cloud agility, if you want to scale up your environment, you can, in 10 minutes, you can add a new host and you can scale your environment up. The cloud availability, everybody is aware about the availability and how the SLA are very good on AWS environment, and how they are sitting all over the world in their regions actually for AWS. And you're getting the benefits of, you don't have to take care of maintaining your infrastructure and maintaining your vSphere environment and doing the upgrades and taking care of the hardware failures and all these kind of stuff, because all of them are being taken care by VMware on behalf of you. So you'll be focusing mainly on your business cases and building your IT will be focusing on your business more. The migration, as I highlighted, if we're doing a cost saving, it has to be a true cost saving, and with a true hybrid cloud between VMC on AWS and your on-premises infrastructure, and using HCX migration automation, actually, you can have a very seamless migration for your infrastructure from on-premises to VMC on AWS, or even vice versa. You can have it very seamlessly, as simple as you're doing a vMotion when you do it on your on-premises vSphere infrastructure. It gives you a lot of options like cold migration, bulk migrations, HCX vMotion, and even it gives you the option to extend your layer 2 and layer 3 using VPN capabilities with the HCX appliances. That can support any type of workload migration. So if you have less than 100 virtual machines, you can definitely, using these tools, you can do the migration as simple as you used to do it on premises. If you have hundreds or even thousands of workloads, with HCX, you can plan your migration. It can be very simple for you, and it will remove the complexity that Dan was highlighting at the beginning of the survey, that 55 of the companies that are trying to do the migration of the workloads are spending over budget actually because of the complexity of this migration. That will bring definitely the complexity to the minimum, and you will feel it's as simple as you're migrating or doing a vMotion on premises. One of the use cases as well that we discussed is Horizon 7. So I've heard a lot of customers these days looking for the VDI environment, and they want to adapt a VDI strategy. Sometimes they are facing issues to get the hardware to build their VDI environment. So in that case, actually, they can spin up the cluster as fast as we discussed on VMC on AWS and just start deploying the Horizon services there, and they can spin up the VDI machines to their employees in shorter times. And if you are a Horizon customer already and you want to extend your infrastructure, again, you can integrate, you can deploy it on VMC on AWS, and then you can integrate your current and Horizon infrastructure with the pod federation to the VMC on AWS Horizon. Moreover, you can get some of the native services like the EFS, for example. So if you put your users' data on a file share, so you can get the EFS services from AWS and you start sharing and putting the files on these EFS clusters, for example, on AWS. DR scenarios, it supports all types of DR scenarios. So if you want to replace your DR from on-premises because it's causing high cost for your for your organization, you can replace it to VMC on AWS. If you want to add an extra DR site for your organization, you can use VMC on AWS. If you don't have a DR strategy and you're thinking to build it now, you can put it on VMC on AWS. And and if you wanna check the option or check which is better for you, you can go for VMC and AWS. What are the tools that you should be using for the DR automation? You can either use Site Recovery Manager provided by VMware, or you can use any replication tool. If you've invested already in Beam, for example, in your environment, you can definitely use that to do the replication for you because it's the same underlying infrastructure. And last but not least is the application modernization and the next generation apps. And with the announcement of Tanzu and vSphere 7, with the IT operation team having the same visibility and the same access using vCenter server to the full infrastructure, your development team will have their own tools, and they can spin up their own Kubernetes clusters, and they can push their API codes and API calls to the vSphere infrastructure because it's built in with Kubernetes clusters now. So you can have a unified platform that supports both of you, the IT operations and the developers teams on VMC on AWS and on vSphere 7 and vCloud Foundation 4. That's it for the use cases. And speaking of VMC on AWS and speaking of the use case that we've explained earlier, just very quickly, we are a VMware partner for some time now. We've implemented 50 plus projects on different solutions for VMware, VDI environments, building SDDC, Workspace ONE, disaster recovery planning, and for different type of customers, enterprise customers and SMBs. We have capabilities in VMware as long as AWS and Azure, so we are an advanced consulting partner for AWS actually. So we know the both worlds. We can give you we can be with you in the journey of starting from assessment and checking the best solution for you and moving on to the execution and migrating your workloads and moving your workloads to VMC on AWS. So that's a quick brief about. We have a full managed service team that can take of your environment, can take care of your environment after doing the migration. If you're looking for a 24/7 NOC team or SOC team, so we are backed up with that already. So definitely feel free if you are thinking of any scenario, definitely feel free to come back to us and we can guide you through that, and we can take you starting from the journey up to the end, migrating everything and even operating your infrastructure on VMC on AWS. And because of the current situation, actually we thought like we can add some promotions for our customers as well. So as we did with a customer in the use case, so we took him through the journey of assessing his current infrastructure and providing some reports to him. So we can do the assessment part for you for free. In addition to the managed services at the end of the migration, we can do 3 months services, 3 months managed services for you for free. This is, I'm speaking about the journey of migrating your workloads or thinking to migrate your workloads to VMC on AWS. In addition to that, we've run earlier last month actually, we've run promotions for Horizon, and we've run some offers for Horizon. And as we speak about VMC on AWS, so you can definitely deploy your Horizon environment on VMC but you have different options. We were discussing that in our Horizon webinar. You can put it on either on-premise or on Azure infrastructure, and we can give you the consultation where's the best fit for your environment to put it either on VMC or on Azure, even on your premises. So we can provide this assessment for you and the consultation for free as well. And we can give you 3 months managed services for free after building up your Horizon environment and your VDI environment. Thank you very much, and I think this is the time for the Q&A. We have Bala joined us from VMware to address any questions that that you could have about VMC on AWS. So please feel free to have the questions, and I think Sunaina has consolidated the questions if you were asking that throughout the webinar. So please, Sunaina, if you can address the questions now to Bala, and Bala, if you can join me, please.
Hi, yes, I'm available here.
Thank you for joining us, Bala, and thank you for taking the time through the webinar.
Thanks.
I've been answering the questions. I've been struggling to connect as a presenter. So our is Rajesh. So you can see in the Q&A, I've been answering the questions that were posted there.
Sorry, is it me or Bala? There's echo.
Sorry?
There is an echo on your audio.
Is it still?
Yes, Bala, there's a little echo from the back. Maybe you can reduce the volume from
maybe you have the audio on the laptop.
Audio. Yeah. Thanks, Basha and Dan, for the presentation. So I have a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to start. So the first question is VMware VMs the same whether on-premise or on cloud, as certain applications may not be built for on-cloud operations? How do we tackle these from the respective application vendors?
So we've answered that on the chat. So the answer to that is any application that works on-prem will work exactly the same way on top of VMC, because we're not changing the format, so you don't really have to re-architect or re-platform any application. You can just lift and shift that to the cloud, and that's the beauty of our solution. So literally, we eliminate the need to do any re-architecting or re-platforming of any application. So any application that's on a certified compatibility list of vSphere, you can be rest assured that it will work on the cloud.
Okay. Now the next question is the case being presented an actual or materialized use case or hypothetical? So the use case that we have presented, Basha, I think you can answer this. You have worked on this project before?
So this I can answer.
I'll take that one.
Yeah, Dan, please.
Yeah. So see, this is a kind of a hypothetical scenario. However, some of the stats, not some of the stats, the commercial stats are accurate in the sense that we have actually taken a actual workload of a particular customer, and we did the whole hog of the TCO ROI analysis, and did an actual comparison across multiple cloud vendors running it on-premise, and then we were able to find the outcomes. The outcomes, what we had presented, or actuals, the fact-based. The customer is hypothetical, but rest of the numbers. So the numbers, what you saw in terms of 47% cost savings, it is a fact. It is justified by the actual numbers, the cost of running a data center, cost of acquiring a hardware, paying AMC, the cost of running VMware on-premise, and the cost of your MPLS, all of those factored in into that cost. So to answer to that, it is yes, the numbers are factual, the customer is hypothetical.
Okay. So the next question is, they're asking regarding the prices. Does the pricing include backup and service charge?
So the pricing does not include backup and the service charge for the backup. So basically what you do is you would instantiate a backup instance, could choose any software that you're comfortable with, what you're probably running in your on-prem, and then just host it on via the AWS VPC, right? You have a EC2 instance, put your favorite backup software, whatever it could be, Veeam or NetBackup or Avamar or whatnot, because these are all available in the marketplace. And then you just point it to the S3 bucket, right? Now, what we do a bit differently is that as normal, the ingress charges are always free with AWS, right? But in our case, and you always have to pay for the egress charges. But with the case of VMC on AWS, it's a bit different because there are no egress charges. So when you want to do a restore per se of a VM or some data to the VM that's running on VMC, there is no egress charges. So that's one added advantage that you have. But the backup and the service related to the backup is not included in the pricing. But I think that is where partners like Citrus come in, who can that for you.
Okay. Now the next question is, the case being presented is from which vertical? And do you have any stats of adoption of cloud migration in different industry sectors?
So this the use case was mainly around a large MNC spread across different continents, and we do have references across the different verticals, and each vertical has its own challenges. But predominantly, we see that the workloads that we address are pretty standard across. So it's the standard SQL server or the Oracle servers or web servers that we are running on prem, and then we are migrating it to the cloud. So in terms of references, we have plenty of references globally, some very big names, and it's all publicly available. Just we probably can share you the link of all the references. But in terms of time and effort for each, it depends on the amount of workloads that each customer has, the complexity of the application. But it's definitely a lot simpler compared to moving it to the native public cloud environment, because there is no need to do any replatforming or re-architecting.
Okay. The next question is, will there be any egress charge in future if customer want to migrate to on-prem?
Yeah, so the standard egress charges that are applicable on AWS apply. So when you want to bring data out of AWS, could be wherever, to another cloud or to another region or back on-prem, the standard egress charges apply. But as I said, there is no charge between the Amazon VPC and the AWS VPC and the VMC VPC. This is totally free.
The next question is, does NSXT 3.0 supports with the vSphere 7.0 on VMC on AWS?
So currently it is being tested. It's in what you call a roadmap item, and pretty soon it will be available on the cloud as well.
Okay. The next question is migration possible for all platforms like Linux or Windows?
Yeah, so as I said, we don't do any discrimination between operating system. For us, as long as the Linux and the Windows machine is running on prem on vSphere, we will support it on VMC. There's literally no difference. It's the same infrastructure that we are running everywhere.
Okay. The next question is regarding the backup. Is it available? Regarding the S3 bucket, what is the max size that we get?
It's there is no limit to the S3 bucket size, if you're aware. I mean, you can go and create, and it's like it can scale on its own, right? And it's nothing to do with VMC. It's completely on AWS side.
Okay. So the last question.
Yeah. I think what kind of hosts used for VMC on AWS?
Yes.
Yeah. Or were you going to ask this question?
Yeah, it was that was the last question that I wanted to ask because we're a little time constrained at the moment. Yes.
So the host that we have two types of hosts on VMC on AWS. We have one called i3.metal. It's a typical vSAN ready node. It's provided by AWS as a bare metal host, and it's got memory and CPU. It's got a 512 gig of RAM and 36 cores across the two CPUs, and it's got around 10 terabyte or 10 to 11 terabyte of user raw capacity on each host. So a minimum 3 node would give you around 96 cores with roughly 92 to 96 cores to 1.5 terabyte of RAM with around 30 terabyte of usable capacity of raw capacity on vSAN. Yeah, so that's one type of host. The other host is called the R5.metal, which is slightly different. It has a slightly higher capacity in terms of CPU. There are 48 cores across the two sockets, and it's got 768 gig of RAM. So if you go for a 3 node, then you get multiplied by 3 of those in terms of compute and memory. And the big difference here is that it does not have any internal disk, and we are using the disks from EBS storage. So we use something called as elastic vSAN for these hosts. And the use case for this is for a customer who has a use case that's more storage bound than compute or memory. So you start with the 3 node, but you can go scale the storage, using the EBS up to 35 terabyte per host, and you can increment that in 5 terabyte chunks. So that's the two types of hosts that are dependent.
Okay. So there's another question. Is there any version dependency ECXI version?
No, so the ESXi version, that's what, as Baja was explaining, we completely make it transparent with the HCFs, right? So from on-prem to the cloud, and we also use the enhanced vMotion. So it basically eliminates any dependency on the ESXi version on-prem and on the cloud.
I think those are the questions for now because there's a little time constraint. But if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to us directly. Thank you, Bala, for answering all the questions. And thank you, Basha and Dan, for presenting.
Thanks a lot, my pleasure.
Yes. And as you can see, the contact details are presented on the screen. You can contact Dan or Rajesh. They are situated in Dubai and they can answer any question, and Islam is based in Saudi. We will be sharing the webinar, downloaded webinar version with all of you directly so that you can view it whenever you can. Thank you everyone for joining, and it was a great pleasure to have all of you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bala. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for taking time. Thanks, Nina.
Thanks.
Bye.